Hi, this is Pastor Scott from Calvary Chapel, Buena Park. Our desire is to teach the Word of God simply. I pray that you will be blessed by the teaching of God's Word. If you are in the Southern California area, we would love for you to come out and join us for our services. Our address is 7430 Orangethorpe Avenue in Buena Park, 90621. Our service times are 9 a.m. Sunday morning, 7 p.m. Wednesday evening. You can also contact us on our phone at 714-676-0258. God bless you. Genesis chapter 33, the long-lost brothers meet again. So, we have been watching the life of Jacob. Oh, Jacob. Anybody remember the meaning of Jacob's name? Heel catcher. Supplanter. He was a cheater. He was a liar. He was a conniver. And he and his mom, Rebecca, arranged it that he was able to steal the blessing from Esau. Prior to that, he was able to buy Esau's birthright. Two separate things, the birthright and the blessing. He bought the birthright with a bowl of porridge. So Esau is out hunting all day, and he comes back, and he sees the stew on the stovetop. Well, maybe not a stovetop, but he sees the stew. And he says, oh man, I'm starving. I'm about to fall. Has everybody been so hungry that you're dizzy, you're lightheaded, you need to eat something now? Anybody ever been that hungry? I haven't. Have you ever thought when you're that hungry, I'm minutes from death? Not quite. I want to get something to eat, but he's willing to sell his entire birthright to get this bowl of porridge. And that's how flippant he was about it. He ate it, it says, he wiped his mouth and he left. It was just no big deal. But then when the blessing came, Rebecca heard her husband Isaac, Jacob and Esau's dad, tell Esau, go out, hunt, get the food that I like, prepare it the way I like it, and then after I eat and satisfy myself, I will bless you. Well, Rebecca heard this. Big problem. Esau was Isaac's favorite. Jacob was Rebecca's favorite. We're going to see this favoritism with children go down several generations, and every time it's a problem. I say it every week, I'm going to say it again. I'm lucky I have a favorite son and a favorite daughter. It works for me. Yeah. But I can't have favorites. And I don't have favorites. But they did. And so Rebecca wanted Jacob to get this birthright. And remember, Rebecca was the sister of Laban, Jacob's uncle, who would also become his father-in-law. Things were different then. It's kind of weird now. And so, instead of going hunting like Esau, where you have to go out, you have to track, you have to hunt, you have to kill it, you have to field dress it, and then you have to bring it home, Jacob didn't have to do all that. Jacob went to the pen, and he killed one of the goats. And Rebecca was so good at cooking, where most people try to get the gaminess out of the game food, she was able to put the gaminess into the domesticated food. It was good enough that it fooled Isaac. Now, what didn't fool Isaac was Jacob's voice. You don't sound like Jacob, or you don't sound like Esau, you sound like Jacob. Oh, no, I'm Esau. Well, come here and let me feel you. And that's when Rebecca put goat hair on his arms and the back of his neck. It's one thing to be hairy, it's something else to feel like a goat. But he felt him, he said, okay, well, you are Esau. So he questioned at least twice. Jacob went to great lengths to fool his dad. And this is what I have a hard time wrapping my mind around. Rebecca came up with a plan. She was the mastermind. She says, go and do this, and we're going to get the blessing for you, not your brother. And then he had to go do it. He had to deceive his dad. He had to actively tell him, no, I'm Esau, when he was really Jacob. And then he had to be the one to eat it, get the blessing, or feed it to his father, get the blessing, leave, knowing that Esau was going to show up and that Jacob was going to be out. He was going to be found out. Who was not found out? Rebekah. She came up with this plan, but it was a short-term plan, and he was destined to be caught. That didn't do Jacob any favors, did it? Well, he gets the blessing. Esau finds out what he did, and Esau swears, after my father dies, I'm going to kill him. And so Rebekah sends Jacob away for two reasons. One is she didn't want him to take a wife from the land of Canaan because they were not believing people. And number two, he needed to leave, get out of Dodge so he doesn't get killed. He goes to the land of Laban, Rebekah's brother. And that's where he finds Rachel and Leah. And he wants to marry Rachel. He works for her for 7 years. He has the wedding night, and he wakes up in bed with, the wrong woman. That's terrible. It's not just bad enough that he wakes up with the wrong woman. It was her dad who made this happen. The man in her life she's supposed to trust more than any other person in the world. And he does that to not just Rachel, but to Leah. He works another 7 years, and he marries Rachel. Now he has two sisters as wives that are battling each other, competing to have the most children so that they can have the most love. It's just terribly heartbreaking. And when they go barren, each one of them were barren at a time, they put their maidservants out there as concubines, and Jacob has kids with them. So now he has 11 sons and one daughter with 4 moms. And this was created by their loving dad. So Jacob was the heel catcher, the supplanter, the cheater, the liar, and he was taken to school by Laban. Laban showed him what cheating was really like. He had been there for 20 years. A little bit less than 20 years. He tries to leave, and Laban talks him into staying. So then he realizes, number one, God tells him it's time to go. So when God says it's time to go, what does that mean?
Time to go.
Time to go. Very good. You passed the test, Dave. And then he talks to his wives and says, I don't think there's anything here for us. And both of his wives said, our dad sold us as property. We mean nothing to him. We're good to go. Second time, God says it's time to go. So he was told twice by God, it's time to leave. Laban goes and he's shearing sheep. He's gone for several days. While he's gone, they pack up the U-Haul and they split. You have he had so much livestock. He has 12 children, 4 wives, all this stuff, and it's not easy. Do you remember traveling with little kids? You're still doing it. Traveling with little kids. You don't go anywhere fast. Hey, something starts in a half hour, you want to go? Forget it. It's not going to happen. Give me 3 hours, we might be able to get the bag ready. But this is a whole family traveling, and they're gone for 3 days, and Laban says, I don't see them. Where are they? Oh, they left. So he chases after them for 7 days, catches up to them. And he's going to do harm to Jacob. But he has a dream. God reveals a dream to him and says, do not do anything to this man, good or bad. Just leave him alone. And he said, I was going to do something, but God, your God, I don't believe in him, but your God told me not to touch you. And so you didn't let me say goodbye to my children. Okay, say goodbye, let's go. And so they're on their way back home. Home is now Canaan, where Isaac lives. The whole reason that Isaac told Esau 20 years earlier, go hunting and get the food so I can bless you, he says, I don't know how long I'm going to live. Well, he's still alive 20 years later. And he's going back home. And the thing that keeps on going in his mind is, Esau said he was going to kill me. Esau said he was going to kill me. And he prays, God, you said it's time to go back home. You told me this. And I think there's a good lesson in that. We pray and we remind God of what he said, not because God has a bad memory, but because we need to encourage ourselves in the Lord. Just like after Jesus fed the 5,000, he put the disciples in the boat and said, go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They're halfway across, and a huge storm popped up, and they were terrified for their lives. They should have said, Jesus said we're going to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. If Jesus says you're going over there, it means you're going over there. He finally walked out and calmed the storm, and they went there, and everything was good. But I oftentimes remind God in my prayers what he said to me. Not because I question his memory, but because I need to hear again the promise that he gave me. I think God's okay with that. We don't hold God accountable because he's accountable to only himself. He's not accountable to me. But one thing that God can't do, there's a few things God can't do. One of those things is he can't lie. God, you said this. And I'm reminding myself what you said so I can be encouraged, because I know that I don't have to remind you of anything. But I need the encouragement. I think that's okay. And that's what Jacob was doing. And because he was afraid of his brother and the promise that he made 20 years earlier, I'm going to kill this man, he sent a messenger, a runner. And he went ahead and he told Esau that Jacob and his family were coming. This is a good thing. You don't want this person's snap reaction. I think everybody can relate to this, but I think men especially so. That anybody ever get that rage that just pops up and it's like you have to deal with it after it pops up? Or is it just me? Am I the only one who deals with anger? So the time you don't want somebody to deal with anger is when you pop in on them. But if you give them a warning, I'm coming, let them process. So he sent a messenger up ahead, said, Jacob is coming home. The messenger came back and said, Esau's on his way to meet you. Is this good or is this bad? Okay, God, you told me. I'm reminding you again. Esau, his brother, he doesn't know whether his dad is alive or dead. He's had no contact for 20 years. 20 years is a long time. And so he's going back. And now we pick this up in Genesis chapter 33. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, and with him were 400 men. Oh my gosh. What am I walking into? 400 men with Esau. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. And he put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. This is kind of telling.
Yes, it is.
This is very interesting. Just like Isaac and Rebekah had their favorite children, Jacob had his favorite wives. He had 2 wives and 2 concubines. He still called his 2 concubines his maidservants. The wives were full wives. The concubines were there for having children. They were less than wives. And so he put them up front with their kids. If something happens, let's let them get it first. That's not great. And then Leah, the one that he worked for but didn't really work for her, but was kind of thrust upon him. She goes third, and then Rachel. And we see that Joseph is mentioned by name, the only child mentioned by name. Now, It's understandable why, because all three of the other women had multiple children. Rachel only had one at this point. So it makes sense that he would be mentioned by name. But we find out later, we learn later when we keep reading through the book of Genesis, who is the favorite child? Joseph. Remember, he got the coat of many colors? Remember, his brothers got jealous of him? And they took that coat, they tore it up, and they put goat's blood on it. And they told Jacob that he had been torn apart by wild beasts, and this is the evidence of his death. But in reality, they sold him to slavery because they didn't like their brother. He was the favorite. So we see the first evidence here that Jacob was going to be the favorite. He was the most insulated against attack. He was the one named by his personal name. Verse 3, then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. So he's out in front of his wives and children, but still, they're stacked up behind him based on how much he loves them. And he goes up and he bows 7 times. This was a cultural tradition that if you were to approach a king or a noble, you would bow yourself 7 times. And so Jacob, when he sent the messenger, was using the term saying that he realizes that he's the servant and that Esau is the Lord or the master. Not Lord being God, but Lord being a person of importance. Adonai is the Hebrew word. It can be God, but it just means Lord. It could be a person of nobility. But the blessing that Isaac spoke on them was that Esau was going to serve Jacob. But still, Jacob came with humility, calling himself the servant, and Esau the master. So he's recognizing that he is the man in the region, and whether he has a crown or a throne or not, he's recognizing him as the person of nobility. So he's bowing himself 7 times. But Esau ran to him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Does anybody know where else we see this terminology in the Bible? It's in the New Testament. The prodigal son, very good. Luke chapter 15, starting at verse 18, says, this is the prodigal son speaking, I will go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him and had compassion and ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. He was just hoping to be brought in as a servant. And his father said, no, you're my son. And so Jacob sees his brother who he thinks wants to kill him. And he's bowing in respect and he's hoping that he's going to live. And instead his brother clobbers him and kisses him. It's kind of a beautiful thing. I've seen a lot of things over the years that separated families. That have made people who grew up together, made people who once loved their brothers and sisters, and once loved their mothers and fathers, and once loved their cousins, and things happen. And the only time they seem to see each other is when they're burying another member of the family. And they can't even be in the same room together. I'm going to kill you, he says. 20 years later, he's there meeting him again. And Jacob is afraid for his life, for good reason. But Esau sees him. These differences don't matter anymore. they shouldn't matter anymore. If all we have is what takes place in this world, I can understand that level of anger that one can have for another when things happen within a family. It's not so for us. We're Christians. This isn't our home. We are not to be thinking of time. We're to be thinking of eternity. What really matters in the big picture? What really matters? If my wife and my kids are safe, everything else is okay. We don't have room in our lives for this kind of anger and division. If there's broken families, it's time to be restored. Especially if we're talking 20 years. It's time for us to move on. It's time for us to get on God's timing, on God's calendar, looking at the world in eternity. I'm still a young man, but my life is already half over. What really matters that much? It's eternity that we have to look at. So picking up in verse 5, he said, he lifted his eyes and saw the women and children and said, who are these with you? He has 11 nephews and a niece and 4 sisters-in-law that he gets to meet for the first time. Wow. So he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maidservants came near, and they bowed their children and bowed down. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. They're following the same custom. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Then Esau said, what do you mean by all this company which I met? And he said, these are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. So besides his wives and children, he bring a bunch of gifts, maidservants, servants, animals that he's giving to his brother as a gift. I'm giving this to you, and I'm hoping that this gift is going to appease you, that you no longer want to kill me. He said, these are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. You know, Jacob became very wealthy working for Laban. And this is part of the blessing that was spoken on him by Isaac. Esau said, Dad, isn't there any more blessing? That's all there was. The aim was off. I hit the wrong target. He gets the blessing. You don't. But Esau is still very wealthy. He said, I don't need that. That's not important. And Jacob said, verse 10, no, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I have seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So he urged him to take it. Now, we still have this custom today. Here, have this. No, it's fine. No, you take. No, really. A couple ladies going out for tea and they're passing the check back and forth. You know that. No, I'll get it. No, I'll get it. So we still have this custom. But they're saying, no, seriously, I want you to take it. And Esau agrees to take it. And Esau said, let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you. So they meet. Everything is good so far, but Jacob is still being cautious. Probably a wise thing to do. Be cautious. Is he just trying to lure me into a false sense of security? Or is this really okay? So again, verse 12, Esau said, let us take our journey, let us go, and I will go before you. Let's travel back to my house together. Verse 13, but Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. So he's saying, we have been on a long journey. These kids are stretched beyond their capacity. These animals, the livestock, I have young ones that are still nursing off their moms. If we go too fast, everything's going to die. We just can't do that. We got to slow down. You go ahead. And what he's saying is logical, but at the same time he's saying, I'm not ready to travel with you yet. He's giving a reasonable excuse. Verse 14, please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace which the livestock that go before me and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. And Esau said, now let me leave you with some of the people who are with me. So now he wants to leave behind some people, perhaps for security, perhaps for safety, perhaps for assistance in travel. And he says, it's not necessary. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir, and Jacob journeyed to Succoth, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is Succoth, or booths. So, reading some commentators, some are saying this was the last stand we see of Jacob being the cheater, the manipulator. You go on ahead to your house, you're going north, and he ends up going south. So is that him being a manipulator again? Perhaps. Perhaps. I see it a little bit different. Jacob is coming home. Home to where Esau essentially rules. Does he travel on his own and find his own place, or does he find himself under the thumb of Esau? Travel with us and come to my house. We're going to travel at our own pace. I'll get to your house, but first I have somewhere else to go. Perhaps he's just trying to remain an individual, autonomous. Was he lying and cheating, manipulating? He didn't say he's going directly there. I don't know. Maybe he was. But I think he was trying to hold on to his own anonymity at that point. Be that as it may, it says that he went one way and Esau went the other. So he stayed, we don't know how long he stayed in Succoth, but he stayed there long enough to build himself a house and lean-tos or shelters for his livestock. Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram. That was where Laban lived. And he pitched his tent before the city, and he bought a parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father. For 100 pieces of money. So this is the same place that, around the same place that Abraham bought some land some years ago. So now he is in this place, and he buys land. He makes the land his own. He purchases it. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Eloi Israel, which means El, which anytime you see the letters in English from the Hebrew transliteration, El, that's God. So if you see Daniel, that's Prince of God. Israel is governed by God. So anytime you see the El, that's God. Elohim is the word for God. So this is saying that El Elhoi Israel means El is the God of Israel. And it's a declaration. So he finally comes back to his home. He meets his brother. His brother meets his family. And thankfully enough, there were no deaths when they met. But he still was not yet ready to put himself in the hands of his brother to rule his life. He still went on his own terms. There's a matter of protecting his family, his wealth. But he had to go and become his own person, even back home. We're going to find out when we continue reading this, as we continue through the chapters, that Isaac is still alive. He was running for 20 years. Now the question becomes, what happens when Dad dies? Because the promise was he was going to kill me when Dad dies.
Yep.
So maybe I'm still safe now because Dad is alive. What's going to happen when Dad dies? Is this a pseudo peace or is this a real peace? Is this a family reunion or is this him trying to lull me into a false sense of security? A lot of questions. What blows me away is the person that Jacob ends up being. In the last chapter that we were in, we saw his name get changed. What did his name get changed to? Israel. He went from cheater, liar, conniver, to governed by God. Perhaps we all have two different names, whether it's a literal name change or we look at the point in our life and we were changed forever. Everybody have one of those moments in your life? You struggled with God, and then after that struggle, something happened. Some of us can put our finger on it and say, this is when it happened, and others say, I don't really know when, but I'm not who I used to be. And that name change arrived. And it changed who we are. It changed how we interact with God and how we interact with other people. The interesting thing about Jacob, he's so much like us. He gets a name change. He's Israel. But that doesn't mean that he goes from Jacob to Israel and he lives his life perfectly after that, does he? He goes through times of rebellion. When he goes through times of rebellion, what does God call him? Jacob. Come on, knucklehead, get it together. And then when he's doing well, he's Israel. How many of us, after that moment when we struggle with God, we find ourselves being Jacob again? Am I the only one who's dealt with that?
I'll volunteer.
Okay, Dave, all right, good. We have all been there. That's what I love about the Bible. It shows everybody warts and all. I always say that I most appreciate Paul, the apostle, but I most relate to Peter. The only time he opened his mouth was when he was changing feet. Putting his foot in his mouth, and I get that. I relate to him. Boy, do I really respect and want to be like Paul, but yeah, I'm more like Peter. We get to see people as they really are, and that's so helpful for us. Because when we think that we have to live our Christian lives as superheroes, and we do that thing, you've done that thing, right? That thing where you said, I can't believe I did that. I cannot believe I did. I'm a Christian. How could I have done that?
It wasn't too hard.
Yeah. I can relate to the people that are in the Bible. We're not saved because we do everything right. We're saved because we have a God who did everything right and has loved us into the kingdom. Most of the time in spite of us. Lord, we want our lives to be marked by the changed name. The name that you give us after we struggled with you. Lord, we want our lives to be marked with forgiveness and restoration. Whatever happens, Lord, your plan is always restoration. Whenever somebody falls or fails in the Bible, in your word, we who are spiritual are called to restore them. It's always your will to restore. Restore relationships, restore lives. And ultimately to restore fellowship with you. Lord, give us the ability to love each other, to forgive each other, to let water go under the bridge. Father, we don't have to act like nothing ever happened, but we need to forgive. We can work these things out. Lord, we invite you into our lives to help us to go beyond these points where we're living in anger and acting like severed relationships are okay. We want to be governed by you in all that we do. Help us to do that, Lord. Help us to give our lives over to you in a meaningful way, not just by lip service, but Lord, that we would truly see our need for you. Turn our lives over to you, Lord. Lord, remind us that the reason we feel like we're more forgivable than others is because, Lord, we don't understand our own sin nature. Help us to understand our own sin nature. Help us to understand that we're no better than anybody else. We're sinners saved by grace. And help us to reach out to other sinners. One beggar showing another beggar where to find bread. And that's by you, Lord. Father, I want our lives to be marked by love, by peace, by authentic faith in you, Lord, that we would be able to walk out our faith experience. Lord, this world is not our home. There's nothing here for us. Everything that's for us is in your kingdom. Help us to remember that we are in eternity now, and that we would set our minds to eternity. Lord, if there's anybody here who has not received you, I ask that you give them the ability to do that now. I pray in Jesus' name.